Good day, this is Eliazar. In our last video, we looked at working with files and we carried out we wrote some code to explain how we can work with files in Python. And we saw that we used the with open command to be able to create a file, write to that file, or read from a file. And I told you the different functions that we use to carry that out. So I said that the with open command allows us to refer to a file or a string or some string data implicitly, making that string data the class file, the file class, and it allows us to now use that string data to access the functions inside the file class. So I said we have some functions for carrying out various operations. I said we have the read function. I said we have the write function. So now today we want to look at json, the json module. So json stands for JavaScript Object Notation, and in Python we use it to persist data. So when we talk about data persistence, this just simply means that when we write data to a file or when we save data on our system or on our local system, that data still remains there. It does not get wiped off. So if you are looking at from our previous tutorials when we looked at user inputs and while loops, and we saw how we could use that to write data to a list or a dictionary, you will discover that the data you write to that list or dictionary only exists while the program is being run. So once you close your program, the data ceases to exist. So this is the JSON module allows us to bridge that gap. It allows us to be able to persist our data. So even though we are done with our program, we can that data that we wrote or we have still remains. That's what JSON does. So it stands for JavaScript Object Notation. And after this tutorial, I will be doing a project whereby we would create a small banking system using the command line interface, and we are going to see how we can apply our knowledge of JSON. So without further ado, I will just quickly wrap up. This video would not be long. It's just a continuation of my previous video of working with files. We are still working with files, but we are going to be using JSON to carry this out. So I'm still going to continue from that file. So I assumed that you all were following me from my previous video. So this was where we stopped, whereby we accessed files that were already in existence on our local machine, and then we read from those files. And if those files were not in existence, we passed them, we skipped them using the pass keyword. So go back, watch the previous video on working with files and get acquainted with it. So just comment your code out from the previous video and we would start working with JSON. So before I proceed, now JSON has two functions that allows us to write to a file and read from that file. So now the first function it has is called the dump function, dump, whereby you pass the data that you are trying to write to the file, and then you pass the name of the file itself, which you are trying to write to. Now, the second one is the load function. The only thing you supply in the load function is the name of the file that you are trying to read from. So that is what it has. That's all, nothing else. So you can use JSON to repeat the same thing we did in our previous video. So first thing you want to do is to import. So you can use your knowledge of the import statement when we looked at modules, if you can remember. If you can't remember, I will be attaching links to my previous videos that I did before, just in case you guys did not watch them, although it's expected because this my tutorial series builds from pre-existing knowledge and takes you all the way to intermediate concept. So please, this is not, I don't do random videos. My videos are built on the previous videos in an incremental fashion. So if I'm stating anything to you, I would be assuming that you watched my previous video. It won't make any sense, and I'm sure you all can agree that it won't make any sense for me to keep on repeating terms that I have already stated in my previous videos. So please go back, watch my previous videos to get familiar with terms I am using here. You come here and say import JSON, and then now we want to perform some of the operations we did before. We want to create a file, so the file would not be in existence, but I would use the W letter within the string and the write function to be able to create that file and at the same time write something to the file. So the name of the file would be JSON file. JSON file, that would still be the name of the file also. So JSON file dot JSON. So you want to make sure you put the extension. The reason is because Python does not allow you to create JSON files. So you can see that there's no JSON file here, PyCharm, so you cannot create JSON files in PyCharm except you manually create them by writing the extension. Now, I said earlier on that JSON has two functions, dump and write. So the dump function allows us to send some data to a file. So you want to provide that data that you want that file to have. So what I will do is I will create a dictionary and call it data set, and this dictionary will have a couple of key value pairs. So Alex, David, age, 34, course. So now this is my data that I will be attempting to write to that file called JSON file.json. So I'll come here and say with open, and I will pass the name of the file, which is JSON file. I'm trying to perform the write. So it still uses the same command from our previous tutorial. But instead of me using .write, I will use the .dump. So I will come here and say JSON.dump, and I will supply the data I'm trying to dump into this file or place inside this JSON file. I will come here and say data set, and I will pass the alias, and that's that. And it will send this data to that file. So you can just come here, change, click on the drop down and run, and you discover that it will not show you anything, obviously. But if I wanted it to show me something, I would have come here and printed out something to the screen just to tell us that, oh, it was successful and all that. But you notice that if you look in your directory, another thing I'm going to tell you, I will tell you something else that is very important. So I will talk about absolute path. I was supposed to talk about it in my previous video, but somehow it skipped my mind. But I will do that here. All right, so now you can see that now it has created a file called JSON file. You can open that and you will see your dictionary created inside that file. So in our next video, I will show you how you can be able to update data in a JSON file. So it's going to be a very hands-on project. We are going to do it together. So that's it. That's how you can create a JSON file and write something to it. All right, so now let's see how we can read from this file to print it out to the screen. So now, since I have already done that and the file is already in existence, you can comment out this with open command and write another. with open, and then can do the same thing JSON. So JSON file, you can come here and say read as file, and you can create a variable that will represent the data that you are trying to print to the screen. JSON.load, and then you can pass the file. It simply means that the content contained in this file, I'm trying to read from that file to display the content to the screen. So the content, I'm assigning it to a variable called dx, and I'm trying to print out the value now. So of course the content is now the value that I am assigning to this variable, and of course the variable now represents the content that I am trying to see. And of course when I print this out, it will display the dictionary to the screen. So you can see that we have the dictionary stored in that JSON file. I hope this is crystal clear. So if it's not clear, please go back to my previous video to understand what this with open command is talking about. But just to do a recap, please take time to watch my previous videos to do you a lot of good. This is not a random tutorial. It follows an order. It's in a sequential order. Please watch my previous videos so that you can understand every point I am at in my video. So now I said with open allows us to refer to a file, to the file class in Python, unlike other object-oriented programming languages like Java, whereby you can import an existing class. Of course, we call them APIs, application programming interfaces. I will talk about that later on. But unlike unlike in Java and C++, whereby you can import a module, have access to an inbuilt file, or let me just say, have access to an inbuilt file that already has classes and functions and code. So you can import it and you can assign it to a variable. So that is what you call an explicit way to represent an inbuilt module in a programming language. But like I said, Python does it implicitly, whereby all you have to do is that you have to just run the with open command, pass the name of the file, which in our case is this file, JSON file.json, and automatically this variable called JSON file now represents the inbuilt file class in Python that has a function that has different functions which are read and write. But this time around, because I am now with open command, it allows you to refer to the inbuilt file class and also the inbuilt JSON class or inbuilt JSON module. So we don't call them classes in Python, we call them modules, because a module is a Python file that has classes in them. But when we look at Java, if you create a Java file, that Java file would need to have the same name as the class. You can say that Java files are also classes as well, but not to confuse you here, we have a file and that file has a class, and inside that class we use that class to access files. Now because I am using with open command, I'm able to access that class in that file and make this my variable that has been assigned this string value as a value. I'm able to make it an implicit representation of that class. So that class that allows us to access a file, this my variable is now representing that class. That's the reason why I was able to use read and write in my earlier tutorials. And I also said that the with open command also allows us to refer to the JSON module that also has a class, or also has two classes called the load and the dump. So the first class allows us to send data to a file, and the second class allows us to access data from that file. But now you can see that here, this my with open command is still referring to this my JSON file, which is now representing that my inbuilt Python file class. But because we are reading from a file, and a file with the JSON notation, like a file that has the JSON extension, sorry, is also a file that has data. So we can also use that same with open command to access data within that JSON file. You can also use this thing coming up and blocking my screen. So we can also use, let me take it away from here so that it won't block my screen. So we can also say that because the JSON module is a the JSON module allows us to access JSON files, and we said with open command allows us to implicitly refer to the inbuilt file class. So because they are both files, we can also use the with open command to access JSON files because they are files. So this command also passes as well to access JSON files. That's just it. That's what we're talking about here. So go back to my previous videos, watch them, and get acquainted. So now let's look at implicit representation. So when I talk about implicit representation here, not implicit representation. When we talk about absolute path, trying to access a file on your local machine, not in your PyCharm environment, we talk about the absolute path. So now here you notice that this file we created ends up here in this our folder directory. It ends up here, but in a situation whereby we want to create a file on our desktop, how do we do that? So what I will do to save us the stress and time, I'm still going to use this file and I will try and create it again on my desktop, and I will tell you how you can be able to locate its path. So how do we do that? The way you can do that is to open up your command line. Your command line is an easy way of finding the absolute path of a file on your system. So you can open up your command line and you see that to tell you the current user of your system and the current directory you are presently at or in. Now I'm in my C users user. Now I know from experience that the next folder will be my desktop folder. You can come here and see desktop. It has navigated to the desktop folder. So what I will do is to copy the path, just copy it, and then come back here to your Python and include it here. So I will explain what I am doing. Now, because in Python, when we started this course, I talked about \n and \t, which allows us to create white spaces in our code. Now, because of that, Python will think that that is what we were trying to do here, so it will not work. So we do what we call escape. We try to escape the backslash in Python syntax. So I will come here and add an extra backslash so that Python would not think that I intended to write \n or \t. That's it. So if I create this, if I execute this code, it's going to create this JSON file on my desktop. And so I will just do everything together so that will not bother trying to waste my time here. So I'm going to create it on my desktop. I'll create it there, and at the same time, I will display the result in my Python. And I'll show you. So let us check our desktop first. It's not there, so that you will not see that I created it before. So there's nothing there. You can go through all my folders here, every single one of them. I don't have a JSON file. It's not there. Let's head back to Python. Click on the play. You see that it has done that. And if I check my desktop, you will see that there's a JSON file there now. And when I open up this JSON file, you will see that it will display that dictionary. So edit in Notepad, open with Notepad. So you will discover that you will see your dictionary. So that's how you can explicitly refer or access, or sorry, how you can explicitly create a file on any place on your system. Just like how I did that on my desktop, you can do that in another folder by just getting the absolute path and creating the file there. All right, so that's all for today. To round up my creating files and to round up getting familiar with the Python syntax, if you've enjoyed my video so far, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you have a problem with this video, please let me know in in the comment section. So till next time, it's goodbye.